fires it up. Leopold ahead for Jerome McGill. That goes right down to Legacy. They're playing up high off the glass and out. Many Legacy's puck-handling confidence. A major change from previous year. Walke walking in. Dropping it off. Here's Mark Mowers walking in. Put it back in. Score! With his third goal of the year, and it is a beauty.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, a special hello goes out to the Director of Media for the Boston Bruins Alumni, Mr. Mark Mowers. Nice to meet you, Marky.
Welcome to the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast, the voice of hockey legends. This is the classic hockey show for classic hockey fans. We celebrate the history of the game with stories told by the select few who actually lived it. Get ready for an all-access pass to the heart of the hockey universe. Episode 53 of the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast has a Boston Bruins focus. First, we'll talk with Mark Mowers, a 7-year NHL forward with Nashville, Detroit, Boston, and Anaheim, about his playing career in his current role as a scout with the Minnesota Wild. Now, before embarking on his pro career, Mowers was a Hobey Baker finalist and a two-time All-Hockey East selection during his days as a University of New Hampshire Wildcat. Mark was also a prolific scorer in the IHL and AHL, before adopting a checking role in the NHL. In addition to talking about his role with his respective NHL teams, Mark shares interesting insights on legendary teammates such as Brett Hull, Steve Yzerman, Niklas Lidstrom, Brendan Shanahan, Zdeno Chara, Patrice Bergeron, and many more. Following our discussion with Mark, we'll talk with the voice of the Boston Bruins alumni. The Emmy Award winning John Horrigan will discuss his role with the Bruins alumni in the upcoming charity game between the Bruins legends and the New York Rangers alumni. And finally, we'll conclude the show with former Bruins defenseman Frank Simonetti, who discusses the origins of the Warrior for Life Fund and how that charity has teamed with the Bruins alumni, the Bruins Foundation, and the Navy SEALs Foundation to assist soldiers and their families. Before starting the show, I want to thank those of you who have left a rating and comments for the show on iTunes. The comments and reviews have been sensational and are greatly appreciated. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the show and leaving a review and rating, as these will help the show be more visible to hockey fans around the world. Remember, you can contact me directly via prohockeyalumni.org. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Pro Hockey Alumni. Now, let's talk classic hockey with Mark Mowers. Back on the show with Mark Mowers, an active member of the Boston Bruins alumni, an NHL scout with the Minnesota Wild, and a veteran of the National Hockey League with Detroit Red Wings, Nashville, Anaheim, and of course the Boston Bruins. Mark, thanks so much for being with us here today.
Well, it's great to be on. I'm looking forward to some questions here.
Mark, back in the mid-'70s, in Atlanta, Georgia, the Atlanta Flames were the team back then, and hockey was born in Atlanta, and so was the career of a future NHL player, Mark Mowers. How did your family end up in Georgia? I have a feeling that looking through your record, it was short-lived. You ended up in New York, but how was it that you were born in Atlanta, Georga? Actually, Decatur, Georgia.
Yeah. So my dad was. This question comes up all the time, and there's actually been a thing that, I don't know, not a stat thing, but I guess every state, like the leading scorers from every state, and I don't know if it just came out or whatever, but I keep getting these texts every once in a while about this guy's joking with me because I'm still the the leading scorer from anyone born in the state of Georgia. But but anyways, my dad was in the service, and he bopped around a little bit. My brother was born in Texas, and I was in Georgia, and then my sister up in upstate New York, and that's kind of where we ended up settling down. So, yeah, it was short-lived, less than 2 years down there, and didn't really get the skates on until I headed north.
What was the youth hockey situation like in upstate New York, and when did you start playing, and when did you start feeling like this is something you had a good talent for?
It's interesting you say that, because I guess assuming looking back, I think most people would think maybe it was already kind of strong and plenty of rinks everywhere, but in our town we didn't really have a rink, and it's just outside of Utica, and I believe there was a rink in Utica, but the town of Whitesboro and the surrounding towns didn't really have a lot of extra ice. So I thank my parents, not as much anymore, but as I was playing, because they were big in it. My mom was more of an athlete than my dad. I hope he's not listening, but no, I'm just kidding. But anyway, I don't know. It was just a group of parents, and the interest, having the Utica Comets around, and that was the hockey team that we kind of watched, at a younger age, and before you know it, a bunch of parents were constructing a rink just in an open piece of land, and we played outside for a few months, and before you know it, the town jumped in and they built the town rink, and off we went. At 4 years old, 5 years old, whatever it may be, but I just continued playing for fun. Really, I just loved the game and liked to score goals, and one thing led to another. Before you knew it, I was 16, 17, and still I, in my mind, I wasn't thinking about the NHL. I tell people that all the time. I never laid in bed when I was 14 or 16 and just dreamt of playing the NHL. I just didn't. That wasn't really on my radar, to be honest. I just loved playing the game and wanted to play as long as I possibly could, and there you go.
Boy, it shows you the power and impact of a community coming together and making it possible for a young guy like you to play hockey, get out there on the ice, have a place to play, and eventually, I was going to say realize your dream, but it wasn't even your dream at that point. But in the meantime, you end up at a great hockey school, the University of New Hampshire. And I'm curious, now, obviously, as your career is progressing, you're getting attention from various colleges, junior teams, etc. Can you talk to me a little bit about that's something now that you're very, very familiar with, but what was it like for you? Which type of colleges and teams reached out to you, and what was the decision end up being to get you to the University of New Hampshire?
Yeah, so I mean, once again, graduating high school just locally and from my hometown growing up, and then getting an opportunity to play some junior in Saginaw and then Dubuque, and but even going into Saginaw, I wasn't really even thinking about college. I was just thinking about extending my career, and then once I moved over to Dubuque in the USHL, then things started opening up a little bit, and I was like, wow, I might be able to go play college hockey here, because you start talking to scouts and coaches and whatnot, and agents start calling. So as far as the list, early on, it was Bowling Green, Providence, and UNH were like the first three schools that reached out to me, and those are the first three schools I said I'm going to visit. That's kind of how I was. I wasn't holding cards or trying to play hardball with anybody. When someone wanted me, I was that attracted me enough to go for it. So I took visits to those three schools, ended up visiting Minnesota Duluth, a big reason because Brett Hull went there, but anyways, I'm glad I did, just to get a look of somewhere, in the Midwest, and then I went to North Dakota as well, same thing, just to kind of make sure that in my mind, because in my mind I was thinking I wanted to go back east, and I didn't want to be right next to home, but right. I wanted my parents to have an opportunity to watch me play if possible, and so in my mind it was Providence or UNH, and those two schools in particular that attracted me, and once again I just wanted to play. They were kind of middle of the road schools, like they were, not in last place, but not in first. And because ironically after I took the visits, it seemed like every team kind of called after too. It was like BU and Michigan and this and that. But just getting back to the point, I wanted to go somewhere I could play, and so I kind of narrowed it down to Providence and UNH. And at the time when I went to Providence, I loved both schools. They were both great. The coaching situation in Providence was a little bit in flux, and that kind of pushed me to UNH, you could say. But so it made it an easier decision to pick the Wildcats. But once getting there and being on campus and starting or becoming more of the tradition, but starting to elevate, being a part of the group that elevated, UNH to higher ranks it was a great time. It was a great time for the university and a great time for the program.
Right, and those are prolific times not only for the Wildcats program, but for you individually. You're remembered for an overtime goal against Boston University, NCAA East Regionals in 1998, with the Wildcats eventually reaching the Frozen Four. Tell us a little bit about your great memories from the outstanding career that you had at the University of New Hampshire.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest, that was the one you hit on, was in Albany, and it was the first time that the school went to the Final Four, at least while it was part of Hockey East. I know back when it was the ECAC, they had some great teams with Ralph and Cliff Cox, and I could go on with tons of names. But as far as Hockey East, we beat BU in, I think it was double or triple overtime in Albany, and I don't think anybody really expected us to do it, but we did, and got to play in Boston was the Final Four, and
right.
Unfortunately, it didn't last long. We ran into a good goalie and a good Michigan team that ended up winning it. But yeah, that was definitely a highlight. And obviously, being the one that scores the goal, it kind of, it was for me. Whenever I'm in a bad mood, I kind of play that tape and it kind of gets me back in a good mood. But yeah, there's a couple of those goals in my playing career, and that's certainly one of them that's up there. And you know what, we had a great team. We had a good, from the goaltender, on out, we had a great team, a lot of depth, and it kind of from there on, over the next 6 or 7 years at UNH, that year catapulted them to a couple more, 3 or 4 more Final Fours, and a chance the very next year against Maine, which didn't result in a win either. But anyway, it was a good stretch there for UNH hockey, and put them on the map there for a while.
Right, and to put you on the map as well to the National Hockey League. You've come out of there, New Hampshire, with strong skill set, strong skater, obviously a leader, established yourself as that as well. You end up signing with the expansion Nashville Predators, and I was curious, what was the experience like upon graduation from the University of New Hampshire? You're finishing your 4th year of hockey there. I'm assuming multiple teams reached out to you. You chose Nashville. I was curious about your thought process.
Yeah, it was, I would say, I don't know if there was multiple. I do, the two that I remember were Edmonton and Nashville. At least that's kind of what it came down to. And, I talked to my agent quite a bit about it, and, we both kind of agreed that, what would be better, than starting out with an expansion team where I'm an older guy because I went to school late, so I was 24 at the time, and it just seemed like the perfect fit where, if I could go and, start out well in Milwaukee in the American League, then, they wouldn't hesitate to call me up because of my age and, the experience the experiences that I've already had. So, and that's kind of what happened. I mean, I played maybe 3 months in Milwaukee and then got the call and ended up playing 30 NHL games my first year. And so on that part of it, it was a good decision. And, was in the organization for 4 years and kind of bopped up and down, and pretty much one full year there. But anyway, it was that was kind of the decision making part of it that swayed us to go to Nashville. Was we just thought the opportunity would be better. You never know, and you could ask every guy you talk to on this podcast. I mean, they could make a different decision, and it could have ended up better. It could have ended up worse.
Right.
So, there's sometimes I think back and think, well, maybe Edmonton would have been more ideal as far as giving me a longer look, because I was kind of a yo-yo guy in Nashville for most of my time there. because looking back, Edmonton, it seemed like they had a good, they gave college guys a really good look, put it that way,
Mm-hmm.
and that was something I didn't really know at the time, and maybe that would have made the decision harder, but I don't think so. I think we went with our gut, and all in all, it kind of catapulted me to get some experience in the NHL, and somebody noticed because you get another contract with Detroit, and before you know it, that year I was after 1 year in Grand Rapids, I was somewhat of a regular NHL player for 2 years in Detroit, so it worked out good.
Right, it sure did. And I want to go back to a couple of your coaches early in your career. One was former Boston Bruins defenseman Al Sims, your coach in Milwaukee, and I was curious.
Yeah.
He developed quite a solid reputation coaching in the minor leagues. What was your experience like? As I believe he was your first pro coach in the minors, and what was Al like as a coach?
Yeah, he was great. He was hard. He tested every new guy. He gave. He was more of an old school coach where, you had to prove that you belong. You have to prove that you're going to work every day, and you can handle the ups and downs of the schedule and wins and losses and all that stuff. So, he taught me how to be mentally tougher, I guess you could say. Because I wasn't, I'm not a confident guy until I get comfortable.
Right.
And that's just the way I was, whether it was the beginning of the seasons on the ice. Usually it took me a little while to get going, or when I meet new people or whatnot. So he was good for me because he was hard, but he was fair. And looking back, everything that he said, it made perfect sense. And like most people will tell you when they're retired, it's hard to see it when you're in the moment. But when they look back, these guys know what they're talking about.
No doubt about it. And speaking of that, you had a really interesting coaching trio, at least for me, a coaching trio in Nashville. One of our previous show guests, Paul Gardner, of course, from a legendary hockey family who had a terrific NHL career on his own merits. My old friend from the Hartford Whalers, Brent Peterson, excuse me. And, of course, Barry Trotz, head coach of the team, who now everybody recognizes as a Stanley Cup winner and a high-profile coach. It's curious now when you, I guess your memories of him as a head coach and how that may contrast and compare to how he's seen these days, 20 years or so later.
Yeah, I think it's hard to tell. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in the room. I don't know exactly what he's doing, structural-wise, but he's still considered a player's coach. He always has been, and I think he still is. Guys like playing for him. I do believe he's become a little bit more demanding, especially with the defensive part of the game. That's kind of his specialty at this point. At least that's the way the teams play. But yeah, he was a guy similar to how I had in Boston with Dave Lewis. He was a guy, a friendly guy, and he put stuff on the paper or up on the board as far as how he wanted guys to play, the power play, all the systems, whatnot, and he expects you to go out and just perform what's been told and work hard and execute and whatnot. He wasn't a yeller, he wasn't a screamer. Very even keeled, as you can see when you watch his game. Still, he's just back there, has a sip of water, and just there's not a lot of emotion. So I don't think a lot has changed as far as his coaching personality. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. I do think his details defensively, he's probably more demanding, and if you're not willing to buy in, he probably is not going to have much time for you, and will speak up maybe more than he would have back in 1999.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Mark, what was Nashville? Obviously, the brand new hockey market, so it's relatively unique. I talked a little bit about Paul Gardner about that, about selling the game and the fans getting acclimated to the sport of hockey. But how did you find Nashville as a city to play hockey in?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, maybe I didn't absorb it as much as I could have just because I was trying to get my career going, and you're maybe a little selfish on that way. But that being said, the building was rocking. All the country singers in there and singing the national anthem and just coming to watch and get a look at a hockey game, which is something they've never seen before. So I really enjoyed it, and it's great to see where it's at right now. It's almost become a hockey city when you go down there. It's a big party before, a big party after. The building's sold out. They do a great job in between whistles with entertaining the fans. They've done an outstanding job keeping it at a high level, and on top of, I could probably list 6 or 7 that I think are better buildings than the rest of the league, and they're definitely in there. The one thing that I remember, and I always, it boggled my mind at the time, but I understood why, but it was kind of like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening, is in between whistles when you're on the bench, and so if there's an icing or a penalty, you look up at the big screen and it would give a definition, it would show icing and then give the definition of icing. Nice. So all the fans kind of knew, because half of them or more probably didn't know what was even going on, why the whistle's going. So it was kind of interesting to have a dictionary up on the big screen during the game. But it's one thing I'll never forget. But it didn't take long because they know what they're watching now. That's for sure.
You're right. So in 1999-2000, you score your first goal in the National Hockey League with the Nashville Predators. Do you remember? I assume you remember that first goal and time, place, and goaltender. What was that like?
Yeah, it was great. Because like I told you, my first year I played 30 games up, and anyone that looks at the stats it shows that it's 0-6. So I didn't get a goal my first year, and that kind of weighs on you a little bit, especially when you're kind of known, at least down in the minor leagues, as being a guy that produces. And even if you're not getting the minutes that you get down in the minors, you still see a goose egg there, and you want your first goal. So. Right. It was against Montreal. I think the game was 4 or 5-1, and just got a quick little break 2-on-1, and one timed it in. It was Jose Theodore was the goalie. Like you said, those are details you don't forget. But the funny part of it, not funny, but so in my mind, I look up at the heavens, and I'm thanking God, thank God the thing went posting in and didn't miss, and. So I got a huge smile, and I think it was Scotty Walker that passed it to me, and he knew it was my first goal. But Tommy Fitzgerald was also out on the ice, and I was kind of going crazy, like because it was my first goal. And Tommy's like, "Hey, come on," and I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, it's 6-1." And he's like, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, it's my first goal." He goes, "Oh, I forgot about it. I forgot all about it." So he thought I was rubbing it in at 6-1, but really it was just because of my first goal. So. It was a great moment and a relief at that point.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you had noted previously your experiences in the IHL and then the AHL, where you were extremely productive. A lot of points, a lot of ice time, and as you noted, you were going up and down NHL, AHL, etc. So my question is, during that time frame, psychologically, from a mental standpoint, is that difficult? Does it weigh on you after a few years? Are you saying to yourself, is this futile? Will I ever make it? What's going on in your mind at that time?
Yeah, we could probably talk about this for an hour, to be honest with you. It's and it relates to what I do now as a scout, because I see it all the time with players. When they get in their second, third, fourth year and they've just gotten a few games, and are they giving up? Is their psyche, all that stuff? It just you're trying to figure out, and going through it, I kind of get it, and I know some guys are more confident than others and whatnot, and going back to the coaching staff in Nashville, and I've seen Trotty a few times, and we've talked about this, and he I'm not saying he admitted it, but he agrees with me that, he wishes the communication would have been a little bit better with guys like me, where you're in a scoring role down in the minors, you get called up and you're put in more of a checking role. You don't know what you're supposed to do, and that's what, you listen to the coach. That's what I did, and I just went out there and I skated as fast as I could. I created energy, I chipped it in, but as far as getting scoring chances and creating opportunities on the score sheet, I just played a completely different game, where it kind of took it took your instincts and skills almost out of the game. And the more you do it, the harder it is to kind of go back. Especially when you're only playing. I mean, there was probably 40 games I played under 5 minutes. You know,
Wow.
'cause at that time it's a little different now. Coaches seem to use the fourth line, more than that. I would say now the average is maybe more like 9, 8 to 10, something like that. But back then, when you had a big bruising fighter or two on the fourth line, and you're the centerman, guess what? That's just the way it rolls, and you're going to get 3 or 4 minutes
Right.
and watch a couple fights during the game. So, but anyway, back to your point. It is very difficult, and I don't know. I want to say by the time I got to Boston, it was almost like my game completely switched, where the skills and the poise with the puck, and I was now completely a checker almost. And I did it because I did it in Detroit because I wanted to stay in the lineup, and that was the way that it was going to stay in the lineup. And for a guy my size too, I call guys like me now like tweeners because you're a skill guy, but you're smaller, and it's hard for you to get an opportunity with good players. And more often than not, you have to make a decision and change your game a little bit, or be a prolific AHL scorer. So, but it's a very good topic, and I'm glad you brought it up because it happened to me, and it happens to guys all the time. I see it on a nightly basis.
No question. And so many times I talk with ex-players, and so much often comes down to, I say it on the show a lot, so much comes down to fate, timing, luck, circumstance, who your lineman is, who your coach is, what the injury situation is. And in your case, you've got to adapt and adjust. And the reality is that you were able to find yourself a good role and play for an outstanding Detroit Red Wings team for 2 years. And the players, it had to be an incredible experience for a young guy like yourself. You're playing with the future Hall of Famers like Steve Yzerman, Brett Hull, Brendan Shanahan, Niklas Lidstrom, some of the best players to ever play. Can you talk a little bit about those guys? I mean, I'd love to find out your viewpoints going into that situation.
Yeah.
You've got Mike Babcock as the coach, high profile, a powerful team. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so I mean, going back, I guess, so after the 4 years in Nashville, I kind of basically asked for my release just because I wanted to get a better opportunity to be a regular NHL player, and I didn't see it happening there, and they were gracious enough to kind of let me go, which doesn't happen quite a bit. So anyways, the choice to go to Detroit, there was a few teams that I could have signed with, all two-way deals, not one-way deals. So, knowing that I was going to have to work up the ladder again. But my mindset was completely different than when I chose Nashville, because Nashville, I thought it would be a great opportunity if I get a chance at whatever. We're kind of a lot of guys on the same page. But with Detroit, I was like, you know what? Like, maybe if I go the other way, and if I can somehow sneak in there and get into the lineup, having so much talent around me, where in Nashville, no disrespect to Cliff Ronning and some of those guys, which I never got to play with, but there was a different, like you said, it was a different lineup in Detroit. And I just thought if I could get in there and get an opportunity, there could be a chance where I could stick, because I could maybe complement some of these guys, in a role playing situation. So anyways, I signed with them and play the first year in Grand Rapids, the entire year in Grand Rapids. I was back to kind of being, the power play guy and the producing type guy. Had a great team there. We made it to the semifinals. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so I had a great year. And then the next training camp, so Dave Lewis was the coach at this time too, because Babcock came in after. But anyway, so Dave Lewis, the next year I got sent down again. I think I was down for maybe 3 weeks and then got called up, and then I never went back. So it kind of worked, but anyway, as far as going into those guys that you were talking about, I mean, I can't even list them all. There was probably, over the 3 years that I was there in the organization, there had to have been over 20 Hall of Famers, I believe. But Lidstrom, just an unbelievable, like, quiet, humble, smartest defenseman I've ever played with, without a question. Yzerman, same thing. He was very quiet. When he spoke, people listened. But just his details and his work ethic off the ice, on the ice, like, I was, as much as in awe I was at times when I was in Nashville, it was even harder. It was even harder my first year in the Detroit locker room, because I was, I didn't want to stare at these guys, but I also wanted to learn from them as much as I could. So, Brendan Shanahan, just the quirkiness that he had with all the stuff that he did to prepare and get himself ready to go, and he was great with me. He was great in the fact that he was one of the players that I got to play with occasionally, and I actually wish I would have listened to him a little bit more, because he was always like, "Listen, you're the centerman, carry the puck." But I was like, I know what you're saying, but I don't feel like I used to. And he's like, "Trust me, just carry the." So he was great in that sense, trying to get me back to being more of a possession guy and not just an energy, chip it in, chase it down type guy. So, but he was great. He was great for me. Let's see, who else did we? I mean, I had Hasek, I had Curtis Joseph, both goalies that were just every guy that was in that locker room was just, no one put themselves above you. They were all about winning and doing whatever it took to win, and you saw it all the time. It wasn't just during the games; it was practice and workouts and stuff off ice. So, Brett Hull was probably the one, like, free bird, I guess you could say. and I loved him, and he would give it to me at times if I didn't catch one of his 100-mile-an-hour passes that he would throw at you on a 2-on-1. But I thought it was pretty fun. I gave it back to him too, and I think we had a pretty good relationship for when he was there. So, but yeah, there's more. They just keep popping at me. But what a team! What a team! We won 2 President's trophies. They're up right behind me right now, behind my desk. They're not going anywhere soon. So, just great experiences. The only thing we missed out on was winning the big one. Right.
The Mike Babcock comes in, I believe, your last year, Detroit, 05-06. And so you had a good relationship with Dave Lewis, obviously. We'll get to that in a moment. But what was Mike like as a coach? What was the difference between Mike and Dave Lewis, and how did that impact you, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much we want to get into this, but just only because I'm still in the business. But and he probably wouldn't admit it, because he does his things the way he does his things, and he has a lot of psychology involved and whatnot. But he picked me out as one of his beatdown guys from day one, and it was hard for me to get past it. So Dave Lewis and his staff, the complete opposite. Joey Kotzer was there, and Barry Smith was there. They were the complete opposite, similar to Trotzy and his crew, just act like professionals, do your job. But Babs was different. He was different, and he got to me, and he wore me down, and eventually it was only 1 year I was with him. But it didn't work out. And I mean, I could tell stories, but I'm not going to get into too much. But it was not for some reason he didn't like me, and it happens, I guess. But I wouldn't say I thought it was justified or I did anything wrong to deserve it. But that's hockey, and you got to try to fight through it. And he broke me down. That's the bottom line. So it was a tough year, and we ended up losing. I can't remember if we lost in the first round or second round that year, but that was the end of my Red Wings career after that playoff loss.
It's interesting. I have a teenage son who's a basketball player, and we've gone through this whole thing together, his whole basketball life from a very young age. And I told him, sometimes it's just there's no necessary rationale behind it. You're just going to end up in a situation where the fit isn't great with you and the coach for whatever reason. Yeah. And it's not a knock on either. And you have to realize that and work through it the best you can and move on if necessary. which you did, and Dave Lewis ends up in Boston and brings you to the black and gold. So my question is about Dave Lewis, who was a very underrated defenseman when he played in the National Hockey League, particularly with the Islanders and Kings. I was curious what he was like. Obviously, you guys had a good rapport, and I feel like he was a little underappreciated as a coach, particularly in Boston. What's your memory of Dave Lewis and how he impacted you?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's gonna be, like you said, there's a lot of people in Boston that are gonna be listening to this, and I feel bad for Dave only because, and I get it, it's about wins and losses, and I know how fans are, and you want to win, and I mean, but if you peel back, the pages a little bit, or and look at kind of the situation and look at what happened there. I mean, we had 12 new faces, I believe, 11 or 12 new players, which is a huge task. Okay, now the other part of that is we had Phil Kessel, very young, very immature. We had Mark Savard, who was a very strong personality, great setup guy, one of the best that I've ever played with for sure. Mm-hmm. But he's a personality. We had a lot of new faces, and we had some guys that just for Dave it was difficult because, like I said, for Louis liked to just lay out a map, and he expected guys to act professional and do the job. And the mix that we had, not all the guys, but we had some guys that just weren't ready to buy in, or it just wasn't time. You just needed more time for them to, mature and develop and whatnot. It was also Chara's first year as a captain. So, and that for me looking back, I think he struggled with it too that year, just because he was taking on everything. He was promised everything, and he was taking on everything. He was running the power plays. He's playing 28 minutes a night as far as dealing with the media. He's dealing with, some guys being, getting the C on their jersey. It doesn't happen overnight where it's just smooth and comfortable. So I feel like there was a lot on Z that year. So it was just a combination of everything. And, he gets 1 year to do something, and, it wasn't like we weren't trying. It just wasn't happening. So, and he's also a guy that puts a lot of faith in his assistants as well. They run a lot of, one has the power play, one has PK, whatnot, so, and I remember talking to him after, and I questioned him about that. I said, if you were ever head coach again in the NHL or wherever, would you take more responsibility of what we were doing system-wise and this and that? Because ultimately, who gets their head cut off? It's the head coach. So, right? You better really make sure that your assistants are doing a good job, or at least have the same mentality or mindset of how you want to do things. So, but I get it. To the fans out there, I do understand. But the guy, he didn't get a fair shake, in my opinion, and it just was a combination of personnel and timing and all that stuff. But he's a great guy, and he deserves his image deserves to be better, in my opinion. Like you said, not only as a player, but I feel like he has he's got a black mark next to his name now, just because of the way his head coaching experience went in Boston.
Right. It was a shame, and I remember him again as a player. He was a real gamer, and he ended up missing out on the Islander dynasty. He was traded at the trading deadline of their first Stanley Cup, but nonetheless, I always liked Dave Lewis, and I'm glad you were able to share your thoughts on him. And I was wondering if you could share your thoughts on a young kid who's on that team now. It's 13 years later, Patrice Bergeron. And what did you see in him then? And is it any surprise to you he's gone on to the Hall of Fame caliber of career that he's had?
No, not really. I mean, it was early. It was really early. But the thing that stuck out with me once again was, there's two things. One, just how humble he was. I'm trying to think of someone in Detroit that was similar like that. It's maybe like a Datsuk or Zetterberg that I played with. Just humble guys that they just come to work, and if you watch them closely, it's amazing. Just their details and how they, whether it's taping their stick or whether it's how they take face-offs and their small little bursts of intensity that they have when they have to win a puck, or so that part of it jumped out at me right away. But on the ice, looking back and once again, he wasn't a big guy. He wasn't a big guy at all. Like probably skinnier than I was at the time, but just the strength that he had, like it was like a strange natural strength that he had to not only win battles, but like get in position and stay on his feet to create even the opportunity to win the puck. So those things are what stood out to me as just a smaller guy, how he could fend off bigger guys and not get pushed around. Where for me that was more of a challenge, just because I had a lighter lower half and his lower half was sturdier and stronger. So.
Right.
But as a player and as a teammate, it's hard to look at him and say, wow, this guy's going to be a Hall of Famer. I wouldn't have said that I would, he wasn't that type of guy that, was high-end skill moves and this and that, where you'd say, like Datsuk, but just the way he played the game at both ends, I did see that, and you could tell he was going to play for a long time. Would I have said he would have done what he's done? I can't say that for sure, but I'm certainly glad that he has, because he's such a humble competitor and just a fantastic hockey player. And even as I watch him now as a scout, I'm like, man, his skating, it's crazy how his skating is. It's average, I guess you could say,
right.
But it doesn't matter because his brain is way ahead of everybody else's, and that's really all that matters.
An interesting perspective. And it must be still interesting for you, as I said, 13 years after you completed your Bruins career, to be able to go to a game and still see two of your teammates, Chara and Bergeron, still key factors in the Bruins team. So you're still connected to the current day Bruins.
Fun. And, unfortunately, they've been injured a couple times together, and they've come up to the ninth floor where we watch the game. So I've gotten to chat with them a little bit. So it's nice to know that they become legends in Boston. They still kind of remember me, so that was nice.
That's awesome. That's tremendous.
So, they're good guys.
Absolutely. So after a brief stop in Anaheim, I can't tell you that I know a lot about Swiss hockey in Switzerland, where you went on to have a great second career, a pro career in Swiss hockey. I don't know much about it. Could you tell a little bit about the 4 years that you spent playing in Swiss hockey after leaving the Anaheim Mighty Ducks? Or I should say the Anaheim Ducks. I got a taste of Swiss hockey in the 2004 lockout. That's kind of how I even knew about what it was. Guys were playing everywhere. I don't know if you remember, but guys were playing every league they could find. So I had a good stretch. I had a good month to finish the season over in a team in Switzerland. A really good stretch. I don't know how it happened, but it kind of just kept going. And so fast forward, I get to Anaheim. I get traded to Anaheim, and Randy Carlisle is the coach. And same kind of thing. It just didn't work out. I just wasn't. I couldn't produce. I kind of lost that part of my game, and it just they put me on waivers. They were going to send me to Portland, Maine, and I said, listen, I think this is the end. In my mind, it's the end. Would you mind if I explore getting over to Europe? They agreed. One thing led to another. Signed 1 year, and then signed a 3-year deal with the original team that I played with back in 2004. But to answer your question, and if you look up, you could go on the teams now and you'll see plenty of North American guys that are playing for the 12. I think there's 12 teams in the Swiss A League. Mm-hmm. It's become unless you want to go to the KHL and make as good of money as you're making in the NHL, it's probably, I would say, the second choice for guys going over to Europe. They pay pretty well. And the experience is unbelievable. Every building is packed. Half of the building is standing the whole game chanting like it's just like a European football game, soccer game. Mm-hmm. I think the regulations have maybe changed a little bit since I was there in 2011. But when I tell you there was smoke bombs and fireworks going off like in between periods, and it's not no joke. There was one time an M80 or something must have went off because I thought the whole building was going to collapse. We were in the locker room. I thought it was over, and they were like, "Oh no, don't worry about it. Just a heavy explosive, but no one will get hurt." They put it in a safe. I was like, "What?"
So, but anyways, it really is a great place to play. You play on weekends for the most part. You're in your own bed most nights. The longest bus ride's about 3.5 hours. And they're passionate. They are really passionate fans. I would suggest anybody that I'm not going to suggest taking a flight over and watch a game, but just pull up some YouTube videos of some of the games over there. You'll be shocked at the fan base in all the arenas and how crazy they are. It was a great experience. Got to bring my kids over, so they got to see Europe a little bit too. So all in all, it was a great finish to my career.
Was your family with you when you were playing in Switzerland?
Yeah, during the lockout, they didn't come because it was only a month. But then, yes, they came. They just moved out to Anaheim. Actually, moved out to Anaheim. We found a place. We were there for about a month, and then I went over to Switzerland and eventually got them over. I think after Christmas, something like that, and put them in an English school. You can do whatever. You can choose. Put them in the German school, French school. We chose to just put them in English school because I didn't know how long I was going to play over there. But
right.
Looking back, if I knew it was going to be 4 years, I probably would have put them in a German school.
Right. Well, either way, an interesting life experience, and you embark on another one as well, which you're currently still in. You become a National Hockey League scout for Montreal, then Buffalo, and then Minnesota. How did that all start, and how did you develop an interest to make that initial contact and get that part of your career started?
So I guess it was 2011. I hung them up, and to be honest, in my mind, I thought I was going to try to get away from hockey and just see if I enjoyed something else. And that lasted, I think, about 5 weeks. And I said, what am I going to do? I can't see me, selling insurance or anything. So I started up a couple of training programs with young kids, and I got the gig with Nesson to do the in between periods at the Bruins games that year. Mm-hmm. I think I had a couple other jobs. Oh yeah, I started a small agency to try to get players from the U.S. over to Europe. So right away it kind of all led back to hockey. And that following spring, I reached out to some people I knew. Tommy Fitzgerald being one of them because he was in management, and a few others that were still, that were in the business, just saying that I'd have some interest getting back in the NHL if something opens up, and you know how networking is these days.
Oh, yeah.
Scott Mellenby reached out to Tommy Fitzgerald and said, "Hey, do you know anybody in the East that's looking to get into scouting?" And a couple phone interviews, and I was working for Montreal as a pro scout. So it's kind of how it panned out, and stayed with them for 5 years. Just thought I needed a chance maybe to move up the ladder a little bit, and didn't see it happening there. So moved on to Buffalo. Was with Buffalo the last 2 years, and then now I'm with Minnesota. This will be my first year with Minnesota, and kind of the same role, but it's fun, it's interesting, and you're always trying to figure out if there's a science to this whole thing, but I'm not so sure there is. Like you said earlier, there's luck and injuries and bounces of the puck. So it's a crazy business, but I enjoy it.
Right, and you have a lot of credibility, as you said. Not only playing in the National Hockey League, but maybe not having things handed to you. So you're fully aware of the struggles involved. At the same time, you've played with some of the greatest players in the history of hockey, and yourself at the highest level. Just real quick, as we get to the end of our discussion here today, is you can talk a little bit about your scouting role with Minnesota. So what would you typically be doing during the season as far as travel? Sometimes I know that could be a little bit tough, but what is your role like coaching for scouting for the Wild?
So to lay it out pretty simple, the job is to start and have a book on your players. Now every team does it a little different. The teams I've been with, including Minnesota, you have designated teams, and it's your job to know those teams inside and out, and basically just keep notes and write reports and file them and send them into the main office and whatnot. But when you're called upon, you need to know if this guy's better than that guy. You need to know if Patrice Bergeron skating is ever going to fall off. That type of stuff, like where guys are in their career. everybody knows the best players. Everybody knows the guys that haven't made it or they struggle to make it. It's those little details in between, I think, are the most important. As you've seen over the last, say, 6 to 8 years, these big contracts at 5-year deals at whatever amount of money, and then the next year their game is it's declining. So it's our job to try to pinpoint this thing and not make those mistakes, because those are the contracts that end up hurting you and you can't get out of them. So
right.
That's the big that's kind of what the role is. As far as the schedule, I would say it's 18 to 22 games a month, something like that. A lot of hotels, a lot of trains, planes, Ubers and lifts. It's if you don't like to travel, it certainly is not the job you want to get into. But I like traveling, and like I said before, I like trying to figure this whole thing out, even if there is no real answer.
Well, in addition to your travels and your work as a pro scout, you also find time to play charity hockey games with the Boston Bruins Alumni, and it seems like you have a lot of fun out there. You're one of the kids, you're one of the young guys on the team, but it's got to be a lot of fun to put on the skates and play with guys like Terry O'Reilly, guys who played in the league before you were born in many cases. Terry O'Reilly, Rick Middleton, of course Ray Bourque, etc. Talk a little bit about that experience playing for the Boston Bruins Alumni.
Yeah, I mean, I going back to the comment I made about being in the Detroit locker room, it's a very similar. It's a little different because I'm not looking at them to see how they prepare and what they do, but it is so much fun interacting with these guys and just talking about life and just random stuff. And I'm so grateful that I eventually got in. It took me a while to get in. I don't know. I still can't figure out what happened, but I put it on the fact that I was scouting with Montreal, and they wouldn't allow me to play while I was working for Montreal. But
that would do it.
Because right when I moved to scout with Buffalo, I got the call and I got the invite to training camp. So, but anyways, it's been a blast, and I love playing with those guys, and even afterwards when we hang out, like I said, just picking up on stories and joking around, because I think most of the like Nifty and some of the older guys that are still doing it, I think that's one of the things that they would probably say they like the most as well, and something you miss the most is just having that locker room banter and cracking jokes and pranks on each other. So it's been awesome, and I hope I can continue doing it, because it's when you leave the game, it's fun to go back in the rinks and scout, but there's nothing like being a player and being part again, and you kind of get I get excited when I get to go to the games. I really do.
That's great. Well, we really enjoy seeing you out there, and we'll look forward to seeing you at an alumni event soon. But in the meantime, really appreciate having the chance to talk to you. We've been trying to get together between your scouting trips, so I appreciate you squeezing me in here, and thanks, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the ice very soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Really appreciate having me.
The Boston Bruins have the most robust alumni organization in the NHL, with over 35 charity games and dozens of other charity events each year. Leading the way off the ice is John Horrigan, who serves as the voice of the Bruins alumni, master of ceremonies, on-site coordinator, and so much more. John's also a professional historian who's won 5 Boston New England Emmy Awards as the writer and host of the historical show, The Folklorists. And yes, he's also the voice at the beginning of this podcast, introducing yours truly. John is a fun and interesting guy, and you'll enjoy this behind-the-scenes look at the Boston Bruins alumni. We're back on the show with one of my favorite people, John Horrigan, the voice of the Boston Bruins alumni, a legend in the world of the Boston Bruins. John, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Mark, for finding the time to speak with me.
I'll tell you, John is a colorful individual, never dull. I've known him for about 5 or 6 years now, and he's always interesting, always on the move, and his mind is going a million miles a minute. But if you are familiar with the Boston Bruins alumni, probably the most robust alumni, if not just in the National Hockey League, maybe in all of professional sports, with a minimum of 35 charity games in the New England area every year and outside the area as well. We'll talk about that in a moment. But John, how did you've had a long career, as we talked about in the Open, but how did you get started with the Boston Bruins Alumni?
Okay, so I was a seasoned cable TV announcer for several high schools throughout the 80s. And in 1993 at the Portland Civic Center, or whatever it's called today, I sat in for a Boston Bruins. It was done by a promoter, so I used to call those scat games. But I sat in there, and I guess I've been filling in for the next guy over the last, 26, 27 years. And I officially went on board with the Boston Bruins Alumni in 2005. Bob Sweeney brought me in, Swoop. He's now the president of the Boston Bruins Foundation. Brad Park was instrumental in my career in terms of letting me be a Bruin and just listening to the man speak about the game of hockey. So he was a mentor. Cleon Daskalakis, former goaltender, Boston University, had a lot to do with my career. I used to do Bruins softball games with him, basketball games. We even did a soccer game with the Bruins alumni. It's not the Bruins alumni, but a Bruins black and gold legends, etc. Mm-hmm. And also, I want to certainly salute some other guys that have helped me out. Terry O'Reilly's been very, very helpful in my career in terms of Tommy Songen. All those guys were instrumental in giving me at-bats. Raymond Bork recently with Raymond doing touring across North America. And, of course, Nifty, Rick Middleton, who's the best boss that anybody could ever have. So I did account in terms of how many pro games I've done, and I'm up over, I think, 1,700. So with all I know I've done over 3,300 professional events, but about 1,700 hockey games. And essentially, my role is, as you see me, I go nuts. There's three of us. Don't feed the animal. I'd like to put that on the booth when I go to a game. But meeting all these ex-Bruins, they become my best friends. And when I first did this, I was like, oh wow, the Boston Bruins alumni, legends. And then there was a time where I did it, for the dough, but now it's just I want to just hang out with my friends, the greatest friends any man could possibly want to have in their life. They're truly wonderful people, and their wives, their daughters, their sons. So I've been very, very blessed to work with the Boston Bruins family and all that they've done for me throughout the years. Very lucky.
Well, you can certainly see that, and I've obviously had that experience firsthand over the last 5 or 6 years, being welcomed into the Bruins alumni fold, and obviously for the reasons you just stated, I've really enjoyed it and continue to do it. But for yourself, obviously, this is a real commitment. Now, earlier in my career, I've worked with Hall of Fame broadcasters, guys like Chuck Caton in Hartford, Mike Lang in Pittsburgh, Rick Peckham, TV voice of the Whalers and Tampa Bay Lightning, of course, and the unheralded Bob the Hawk Crawford down in Hartford with the Wolfpack, and they all had one thing in common, which they share with you, among other things, and deep knowledge and love and passion for the game, but also the preparation and your uncanny ability. This is so important when these groups come in and they play the Bruins alumni. It's a big event for the teams who are opposing the Bruins alumni. It's a big deal, and all those guys up and down the roster. You're able to introduce them and talk about them, fluently during the game. Talk a little bit about the preparation, what goes into being the master of ceremonies and the voice of the Bruins alumni during one of their exhibition games.
What an insightful question. Wow. You're right, preparation. I'm 58 and a half. I've been announcing hockey now since I was 20. So I get there 90 minutes before the game. If the Bruins have a game on the Moon tomorrow night at 7, I'll be there at 5:30. I'd like to even get there earlier. I'd rather wait around than rush. But I basically get there. I coordinate the event on site with the event coordinator from the charity side. Where's your roster? Put the numbers down. I timed myself. The best I've ever done with 20 names numbers was 7 minutes and 40 seconds that I memorized, where I walked outside, walk around the arena, and then I have it memorized. So, and then when they come out on their pre-skate, and this is the visiting team I'm talking about, not the Bruins. I know them by sight, and I hang out with them. I can identify them 10 different ways to Sunday. And they carry the puck 60% of the time, right? So I don't have to worry about that. But the other team, then I look at indicators. The pre-skate, right before we start the intros. Okay, he's got a mustache. What color gloves do you have? What's his stick? What do his skates look like? I'm just looking for 3 indicators that are non-numerical, so I can identify them. And then positional, who's he on the line with, who's going to skate with. Normally those lines the guys don't know until the game is in the flow, so then I can get the line pairings. But I'll go out at the intermission, do a quick memorization again, go over my notes. I'm doing statistics. I'm tabulating shots on goal. I'm scoring the game. What's the time of the goal? I'm also playing music and running the scoreboard mostly. But I prefer to work larger barns where I don't have to do the music anymore. It's getting old for me. My shows, I'm lost in jock rock, but this past trip, for instance, I had pro sound guys, and that takes the burden off of me and not running the scoreboard. But I can do it all. If we go, we've gone to these remote rinks in Labrador where they just have a rink and a simple PA system where I have to do it all, run the whole show start to finish. And that's my forte. But in terms of making the game about the people we're playing, right? So those guys, if they're firefighters, they're just trying to raise money for a civic organization or for a charity or for tragedy. I want to make those guys and girls feel like kings and queens in front of their families, their husbands, their wives, their kids, their grandparents, their friends. And I'll throw some comedy in too. And, I never went to the big leagues, Mark, because, I like to say for everyone that makes it 99, don't be the top of the 99. But in terms of hockey, the guys, you were talking about some great radio voices and seasoned guys. I don't think I could ever achieve that level, but I took the play-by-play narrative into a live arena, and nobody else does what I do, or so I've been told, across Canada and the United States. So I've been very, very blessed, but it is preparation and always checking your notes. And I get maniacal and I have high blood pressure. And my doctor went to one of my games and he says, "I'm surprised you didn't die during one of those games." And says, "I'm going to have to up your pills for your high blood pressure medicine." So.
Well, I only have one goal when I'm at the Bruins Alumni games. That is to stay out of John's way. Do not interfere, because you can't overstate the amount of dexterity it takes to, when we went to the NHL Alumni Pro-Am, for example, just sitting down there while you're in the penalty box and you're conversing with players on both teams, you're in charge of the music, you're doing all the announcing, all the master of ceremonies things, and doing them all simultaneously. So if you're a fan and you're watching an event like that, you think you have the same experience as you would if there were 3 or 4 people working it. You don't know that it's often a one-person operation. But speaking of that, John, you've had the opportunity to take, I'm a little bit envious, I'll be honest with you, some great NHL alumni tour trips all over the place, particularly to Canada. And most recently, you were in British Columbia. Now, the thing I love about it is that you can see the great appreciation that the folks have when they welcome you guys, and Bruins Nation extending throughout North America. Talk a little bit, first of all, your most recent trip, which was to British Columbia, and then catching up with some old faces from the Boston Bruins alumni.
Yeah, you're right. Well, this past trip, we went out to British Columbia, and we're recording this interview first week, October 2019, but we visited Victoria, Vancouver Island, and then we went north to a place called Campbell River, and it's amazing how the black and gold, the Spoke B, goes from the north to the South Pole. It's just all the way up, but it goes east and west as well to both coasts, because these people, it was an outdoor event at Victoria where we did the sign and autograph, introduce the players. There was a tailgate, and then they went inside and signed at Victoria. It had been raining the whole time we were there, except the sun parted for a beautiful 3 hours for us to get that in, which was great. And then we played at the arena, at the Rod Brindamore Arena, and had a fantastic game. It's great. Canadian people, I love Canadian people. I would one day like to emigrate there or live there. I will tell you that, because I've been all across Canada with the Bruins alumni. We played every province with the exception of Yukon and the Northwest Territories, and none of it. But we went to BC. We've been to Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec, Labrador, Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and assorted islands off the Atlantic coast. And that's courtesy of Rick Middleton working with Steve Walton, who's a promoter in New Brunswick. And it's been a magical time. So anyways, we got to Victoria. We flew out of Boston, Chicago, to Calgary, and then Calgary, I got next to a guy in one of those small planes. I have a neck injury from kayaking this summer, and I was like curled up like a ball. I'm still in pain. So we landed, touched down, and the jet lag, it's a little longer than a regular West Coast trip. And that night we went out, and Ray and I sang with the band. I sang Cinnamon Girl, and Ray sang Eric Clapton. Mm-hmm. And then the next day we had the game, and it was great. Fans loved it. The after party in this beautiful place called Bear Lodge. And then we bugged out the next morning and had a matinee at Campbell River. So we left early and got there about noon, check in the hotel, on the bus, autograph session, play the game. And Campbell River was nice because a guy by the name of Troy Robley pulled us together. And the people, they turn the lights down. I do my intros, and then they do the American and then the Canadian anthem. And I posted that on the Bruins Alumni Facebook page, I believe, of the crowd singing the Canadian national anthem. Mm-hmm. Wonderful time. It was 1-1 through 2 periods. I had never, out of all those games, I'd never seen a 1-1 game. And then we just blew it open. And we had some ex-Bruins, which is great. And that's another thing. When we go out to these remote areas or areas that I consider remote no more, you meet the players from around there that have ties to the Bruins. And we had Brad Palmer, for instance. He couldn't play. He had an injury, but he spent a year, I think 82, 83 with the Bruins. And he caught up with Ray. He was a first-round draft pick, Minnesota, and had 22 goals the previous year. And then he went on to play in Europe. We had Mo LeMay. Mo won a cup with the Oilers in 87. He longtime Vancouver Canuck, including a 21-goal season. And then he came to the Bruins. It was the 88 Stanley Cup finalist, and then he went to play in Europe. Good guy. And then also we had Mo, Larry, and Jeff. Larry Melnick, 10 years in the league, I think 3 with Boston. He won. I give him credit for 2 Stanley Cups. He got his name on one for 85, but he didn't get on the 84 Edmonton Cup. And let me go back to that. I make sure, because the Richard Sevigny rule, I might as well tell you. Richard Sevigny, the goaltender of the Montreal Canadiens, he dressed for the Stanley Cup Finals, one game because Bonnie Larocque tweaked his groin. Never played a regular season game in 78-79. Got his name on the cup. Mm-hmm. Guys like Don Ori, who played 72 games in 76, didn't get his name on the cup, and nor did Larry. So, anyways, Larry, tough guy, as you know, but it was good seeing him. And then finally, Jeff Courtnall. Courts, if you look at his stats over 17 years, over 1,200 games, over 400 goals, 5-time 30-goal scorer, had a 42-goal season with Washington, cup winner, 88. We had to play against him. Good guy, still had the Jets. He was the one racking up the points. And then afterwards, the hockey players, their job is to play hockey, sign autographs, take selfies, and drink beer, right? And so that's an easy life, and I've been very, very blessed. So blessed, Mark. I mean, the long bus rides, they're so horrible. You drive 4 hours, then you stop for lunch, and then you nap, and you listen to music, and you read your book. It's a terrible life. I mean, it's glorious, and I'm very, very blessed. And my wife has been so patient with me. She married a circus clown, and to allow me to go on these trips along with my work. And I like it because it's literally, we're a show we can plug and play anywhere on the face of the earth. I like to call the Boston Bruins Alumni the greatest hockey show on earth. But it was a wonderful time.
Sure looked like it. And again, all for charity and the appreciation and heartfelt passion the fans have in some of these very remote areas for, as you said, that the smoked bee and the players who wore it, and the whole family is quite heartening. In addition to Bruins alumni, you've also taken some interesting trips with NHL alumni. including the Toronto Maple Leafs and Montreal Canadiens. I was curious about if you had an opportunity to meet one guy. I was interested in getting a little feel for what he was like off the ice. Is Guy Lafleur. Did you have a chance to meet him on any of your trips?
Oh, absolutely. I did a tour with him and Steve Shutt. Speaking tour, we introduced him. I've done games where he was the celebrity host. Got to sit with him. What a marvelous guy. Class act. He's the best. In fact, he just recently had, I believe, quadruple bypass surgery. So everyone loves the Flower. The Flower is one of the greatest players ever to play. And I like to say, if it's a Hall of Fame hockey player, usually it's a Hall of Fame man, and that goes to the Flower, goes to Gray. But he's such a great player, and just talking to him about when he came out of retirement and then played with the Rangers and the Nordiques, people, he's a little uncomfortable talking about that. It's all about the Cups and with the Habs, but a fascinating guy. Was a helicopter pilot. I was very, very blessed to tour with him and Shutty, Steve Shutt. So, yeah.
You've had you've obviously encyclopedic, if there's such a thing as an encyclopedia, a Google-esque memory and retention of hockey. But I was curious, just as a fan, looking back before you even worked for the Bruins Alumni, what was your favorite hockey memory as it related to the Boston Bruins?
Okay, let me back up on that because I'm going to come out. I never played organized hockey except as a peewee. I don't know the game. I don't watch the game. I just announce the game. That's what I tell the guys at the end of the game when they get on me. And my earliest Boston Bruins memory. Okay, here's one for you. It's the 68-69 season. So no, it's the 69-70 season. I have my three brothers. I think three of them lived in. We were sleeping together, triple bunk beds. And I hear on the radio, 1969-97. It's November. Okay, I hear on the radio the Bruins at the intermission. I used to listen to them, and I was 8 years old at the time. And how many guys did they get on the ice? Because the hockey announcers announcing, how many guys did they get on there? Boy, Stanfield, McKenzie, Esposito, or I didn't understand the concept of line changes because we couldn't get TV 38 back then. Right. And I remember them breaking in and talking about a sea monster that allegedly washed up on the beach in Scituate. For some reason, that sticks out. And years later, I actually examined a portion of that from a marine biologist. That's one of my earliest ones. I will remember when 2011, on June 1st, 2011, Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals, Bruins on their way against when the tornado hit in Western Massachusetts, and a friend of mine from Monson, I just decided to call him, and I said, "Well, you going to watch the game?" He said, "No, I'm going to listen to it." I said, "Oh, okay." And my new home. And I said, "What? My car." He'd lost his home. So I
can remember. I remember that day because I was working in Hartford, American Hockey League at that point, and heard the weather reports. I decided to drive home, try to get out ahead of it, and I did. But I remember stopping at the rest stop in Sturbridge, Massachusetts, and seeing the sky go completely dark, and I raced home. But the next day, driving back, the damage that the tornado did in that area, and it was in Sturbridge. There's a little league field that my son used to play at, and tournament things like that, to get completely wiped out. I mean, all the trees around it, everything was completely wiped out. That's what I remember about that day. But nonetheless, we have a game coming up. We just talked with Frank Simonetti.
Can I give you one more memory, though? And
yes,
we're still asked about this today. And this dovetails nicely into what you're about to talk about Frank. The one that I remember most, and I remember I was in high school at the time, and the smart girls watched the Bruins with the guys, right? We're still friends today. The other girls stayed in the kitchen, but the smart ones came out, and I'll see them in my reunion. But when the Boston Bruins, at the end of the game against the New York Rangers in Madison Square Garden, had to go up in the stands. Terry went after a guy because they grabbed a stick. Milbury slapped him around with his sandal or whatever it was. Tommy Songen was there. Nifty was in that game. Yeah. That's probably the most memorable moment, and it doesn't even have anything to do with hockey. It was off the ice.
It was, and for myself, I shared that, and I had a unique experience. It was during college break. And I went to a bar with my friends in that night. Towards the end of the game, a pub called Casey's Pub in Worcester, Massachusetts. We walk in. Now, back in those days, a big screen TV was still a novelty. And we walk in. We're there for a few minutes. I look at the screen. the game's ending, and all of a sudden this chaos breaks out. And honestly, it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. The whole place just erupted. It's on the big screen, and the guys are in the stands. I can't even believe what I'm watching. It's like, it was just would stick with me forever. 40 years now, and I remember it like it was yesterday. It was just incredible. And of course, those type of things you don't see anymore. But back in those days, it was quite an event for a 18-year-old. In Massachusetts, but I did want to, again, that leads into just, we talked to Frank a little bit about the Warrior for Life Foundation, but what an event that we have coming up at Babson College at the end of October on the 26th. New York Rangers will be in town for the first of a 2-game set, and that game will be in Waltham at Bentley College. But among the people who are going to be there, not all playing, but you'll have the legends, Hall of Fame legends like Rod Gilbert, Jean Rattel, Brad Park. The gag line, goal of game line will be reunited, at least in their personage, not on the skates. Personage is not a word, but anyway. But with Hatfield, Gilbert, and Rattel there, a lot of guys played on both teams. I think there's about 7 or 8 guys who played on both the Rangers and the Bruins in that one. But that's going to be an exciting event for yourself, a little out of the ordinary, and I'm sure you're looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, I'll probably get a healthy scratch at Madison Square Garden, or so I'm expecting. Sometimes the big barns, they go with the house guy, he's union or whatever. It's a home and home, as you mentioned. It's the 1 o'clock start Saturday, October 26th at the Bentley Arena in Waltham, Massachusetts. Beautiful new arena. The staff there are awesome. And it's the inaugural Alumni Classic Face-Off for Heroes. And it supports the Boston Bruins Foundation, which supports children's charities and other charities throughout New England. Millions of dollars they give away, and that's Bob Sweeney's baby, and they've extended so much help to other people. And then the other one is the Warrior for Life Foundation, or the Warrior for Life Fund, which supports programs and infrastructure that help military families from all service branches cope with the unique challenges of combat, extended deployments, disabilities, and the long-lasting effects of war through the game of hockey. So that's a synopsis of it. And we're going to get actually some, the Navy, I understand, may have some Navy, these are Navy SEALs, of course, that we're dealing with. They're out of Virginia. And Frank Simonetti, let me back up on Frank now. So Frank's been with the Boston Bruins Alumni, basically since our inception, 4 years in the NHL, Hall of Fame at Norwich University, soccer and hockey. He's such a brilliant mind in terms of putting these things together. He's done Bowl with the Bruin over the last few years, which is a golden event, off-season, just a fun event, and has nothing to do with hockey except the guys. And he and his wife, Maria, just the way that they coordinate things is spectacular.
Yes.
So this one's at 1 o'clock at Bentley. And it's going to be good. And you mentioned some of the names of the Rangers, and let's give a shout out to the New York Rangers. I mean, there's always been a rivalry. Obviously, the Jockerman and Turk Sanderson incidents. When they allegedly jumped him, but I thought Turk deserved it because he was looking for it. And if you look at the film of it, he knew it was coming, and he did well on it, and he kind of had a smile on his face. So, but the Rangers were founded in 1926 by Tex Rickard. Obviously, original 6. The last cup that they won was 94. They've had so many great players that have dressed for them and played in the great Madison Square Gardens. And you mentioned some of the other names there, which I thought was pretty cool in terms of that will be playing. Like on their side, Glenn Anderson, 6 cups. Dave Maloney's coach, he said Vic Hadfield, Gilbert Rattel, Brian Mullen, Joey's playing on our side, Brian on the other side, the Hell's Kitchen Boys, brothers. That's a rarity in itself. Mm-hmm. Adam Graves, Brad Richards, one of my all-time favorite athletes, the coolest guy you'll meet, and philosophically he takes me to a higher level, Ron Duguay, Colton Orr, former Bruin, Stephane Matteau, Tanner Glass, some Navy guest skaters and a congressman, Brian Leach, Hall of Fame, Bruin, Jeff Bukaboom and Jay Wells. I got to tour with Jay a couple of months back, Tom Laidlaw, et cetera, and then the goalie, Steve Valiquette. So that's a good Ranger team we're playing.
It's a good team. Yeah, a good team. And we're countering with some good young talent as well. So it looks like it's going to be a a fast-paced event as well.
Did you say young?
Relative. We've got Mike Mata. We got Dan Lacouture.
Yep. Yeah, Lackey's been touring with us. Great. He's a great addition. Yeah. We have Nifty and Joey Mullen, Hall of Fame. Ray's going to play, so we get 2 Hall of Famers on our team. And they get 2 with Glenn and Brian. Actually, they get 4 if you count Ratty and Gilbert. And then we got Tommy Songen, the Bruins alumni all-time leading scorer. If you didn't know that, he will tell you. No, but he's always been. He was a point a game. He had a streak for points or a goal streak of up over 120. I remember that because I was charting it. Mm-hmm. And then guys like Andrew Alberts, Frank, of course, David Shaw. He's one of the best, and he's got that dry sense of humor. Bobby Beers from the radio. Al Iafredi, Big Al, Splendid Al. 4 All-Star games. 3 times to get the hardest shot with the wooden stick. Razor, Andrew Raycroft, you see him on Nesson. He's going to be the goaltender reluctantly. I mean, he and Reggie Lemelin beat the Canadians outdoors at the Winter Classic in Gillette Stadium on December 31st, 2015, which was outstanding. And he did also, when we did the Habs versus the Bruins, we did a tour of 3 provinces of Canada a couple of years ago, and he was there. And then you got Reggie, you got Swoop, Kenny Linsman, always still quick on the draw. Bruce Crowder, Chow. He's an old battle wagon. Some of the injuries he's had. Puck finds him, but he still can play, and he'll play center, right wing. Kenny Hodge Jr. coming back from a knee injury, another guy, DC boy, plays well. Mark Mowers, versatile forward, always with a smile on his face, quick. Stevie Leach, hopefully, will be with us too. He's been a long-time Bruins alumni guy. So, and Ray, of course. So it's going to be good with some Navy guest skaters. So I'm looking forward to it. I've done games like this in arenas like that before, so I have no apprehension. I think in the Madison Square Garden, they're going to probably defer to their PA guy. They're not going to play-by-play, or so I don't think. But it'll be great, and we're going to be staying down there and taking the Bruins-Rangers game, in addition to playing the Rangers down in New York. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Folks can get tickets online. I know you're going to talk with Frank and give you more details, but it's Face Off for Heroes. Boston Bruins alumni versus New York Rangers alumni, Bentley University, and it's Warrior for Life Fund. And if you Google any of that, they'll be able to find it, or just go to warriorforlifefund.org. That's probably the easiest.
Right, and also BostonBruinsAlumni.com, where you can just follow the links, and we'll be posting updates on lineup changes and anything else as the game gets closer. But in the meantime, we will say thank you to John Horrigan for taking some time tonight. As I said, John is somebody I joke around with a lot, and we have a lot of fun, but for whom I have a tremendous respect because of all the little things he does that maybe people don't notice, and the hard work that he puts into every single event. It could be a remote event out in the middle of nowhere, and maybe nobody would even notice, but he always gives 100% to the event, and always makes it a special night for not only the Bruins alumni, but their opponents and families as well. So we thank John again for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you live and in color very soon.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And can I just, for the folks listening, my relationship with you and I literally are the same type of guy. We're the only 2 guys in the world that can name every WHA roster. I know the goals and assists. You know all the history behind it. I mean, we have we love old-time hockey. But you and I grew up an eighth of a mile apart from each other in Marshfield, and we never knew that during summers, which I think is so cool. So,
Oh, absolutely. Brother from a different mother, as they say. And
that's right.
But anyway, John, you're the man. We appreciate it, and we'll look forward to talking to you very soon, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
And finally, we'll conclude the show with former Bruins defenseman Frank Simonetti, who is very closely involved with the Warrior for Life Fund, and of course is coordinating the Bruins-Rangers alumni game on October 26th. Had a chance to catch up with Frank outside the ice surface at the Bruins practice facility, so it sounds a little bit different than our usual interview. But we talked with Frank. He gives a good overview of both the event and the program. We hope you'll enjoy it. Thank you. Well,
met a guy named Tony Cabana. He was a guest skater on our one of our alumni games, and we hit it off right away. And he got involved in my bowling event, and a few months after that, he asked me if I would be interested in going down to Virginia Beach to meet some of the Naval Special Warfare community that he got to know through the Navy SEAL Foundation. And the story is interesting because he got involved with them after watching Lone Survivor. He was so moved by the movie that he started doing research, and he figured out quite quickly that maybe not enough was being done to recognize these guys or help them out. So he made a cold call to the Navy SEAL Foundation, called the CEO right up and said, I'd like to get involved. She called him right back and said, come on down to Virginia Beach, I'd love to meet you. And over the course of the next year or so, Tony, through his relationship with Cross Insurance, he's a VP at Cross Insurance, took some Gold Star families up to Patriots game, let them carry out the game ball, and really got entrenched in the Navy SEAL Foundation. So he's sitting with the CEO, Robin King, one day, and he sees a hockey puck on the desk. He says, hey, what's that all about? I play hockey, tell me about it. Well, the Navy SEAL Foundation had been supporting a hockey program in Virginia Beach run by Naval Special Warfare and a few of the Navy SEALs. And they were supporting that program because of its benefits to the community and their families. Tony went down and met with the hockey program. He played in a couple of memorial games honoring 2 SEALs that were part of the program that were killed in Afghanistan. He came back supercharged. And he asked me if I would go down with him to play in that game the following year. So I reached out to Bob Beers and said, hey, Beersy, I'm going down to participate in a game. We're trying to maybe build them a better locker room because there's no facilities in this particular locker room, no ADA compliance. There's a whole laundry list of things. Bobby and I went down, met the community. We saw how important hockey is to these warriors, not only the special forces, but all military, because Virginia Beach is the most dense military concentration in the country, all branches of the service. So there are Air Force, Navy, Army, Marines, Coast Guard guys playing in this hockey program. We saw how important this is. Hockey helps them reacclimate and decompress after coming off a tour. When they're deployed, other team members will take their kids, bring them out on the ice. There's a sled hockey program. It helps with sleep deprivation. The laundry list of how important hockey is to this community is long. I came back from that visit supercharged, and I started reaching out to all of our alumni and saying, hey, look, there is something special going on in Virginia Beach. We need to be a part of it. I talked to Rick Middleton, talked to Bob Sweeney of the Boston Bruins Foundation. And this past summer, Bob Sweeney, Rick Middleton, myself, Kenny Hodge Jr., Bruce Crowder, Tim Sweeney, and Dave Jensen went down with our wives. And with the support of the Boston Bruins, we helped run 3 hockey clinics, youth hockey clinics for all ages. The Bruins put on a big barbecue for the families. We gave out street hockey equipment to all the kids. It was a fabulous event. The next day, we played in their memorial hockey games. So it's interesting. The year previous we went down, there were maybe 30 people playing. Second year we got down, now there's 50 people. Word got out, and it was such a moving experience because you're playing with military members, both male and female, their children, their wives or spouses, and it's such a family-oriented community down there, and hockey is special. So, you fast forward a little bit, their program is so successful, and their rink is so small, it's a converted grocery store, and they don't have enough room to expand in the property. We are helping them, one, try to grow the program, and to do that, we need to raise funds to help them build a new hockey rink. What we're doing on October 26th is we're bringing in the New York Rangers alumni to play the Boston Bruins alumni at Bentley Arena at 1 p.m. It's a beautiful, state-of-the-art, Platinum LEED certified facility, holds 2,200 people. We really want to bang it out. So if you'd like to come watch Ray Bork, Rick Middleton, Brian Leach, Joe Mullen, three of those guys are Hall of Famers. Rick should be. and Adam Graves, and the longer list of people goes on. Bob Beers, Amy Brickley, Andrew Raycroft. We had a great crew playing in this game, all to benefit the Warrior for Life Fund and the Navy SEAL Foundation. And what's been heartening through our efforts, and it's fairly young, we're only 6 months into this thing, when we reached out to key sponsors, Harvard Pilgrim, Health Plans Inc., Tufts, all New England-based insurance companies who support military causes, they were on board in a matter of minutes of our meeting. They said, we're behind this, we want to get involved, and they are supporting us with resources and contacts and reaching out to their communities. I also want to thank the Bruins Foundation, Boston Bruins Foundation, Bob Sweeney, who have really picked up this event and helped drive it as a key part of their overall philanthropy that they do, helping children's causes in New England, and in this case, down in the Virginia Beach, Norfolk area. It's been a godsend to have them involved. And I can't not thank the New York Rangers for their involvement. They jumped on board. The Boston Bruins Alumni, they're on board, and the upswell of interest in this event and the cause is dramatic. We've got Nesson that's going to come and cover the game on Saturday. We've got 98.5. Thank you, 98.5, for all the support you've given us. The Boston Bruins Alumni and their media staff has been tremendous. So if you want to be part of the cause or part of the game, please visit warriorforlifefund.org, where you can buy tickets. Military and first responders and their family are free, so please, we want to pack this building. Tickets are available if you walk up at the door too, but if you register early, you'll be sure to get in the building and get on the list. It's a tremendous event. We hope to see you on Saturday, October 26th at Bentley Arena.
Thanks for listening to the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast, the voice of hockey legends. Just a reminder to please consider giving the show a rating and or review on Apple Podcasts. The link is in the show notes. These ratings and reviews help us become a lot more visible and make the show more accessible to hockey fans everywhere. I personally read all the reviews and greatly appreciate them all. If you have thoughts or suggestions for the show, you can contact us through our website at prohockeyalumni.org, or be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Pro Hockey Alumni. Thanks for listening.